The pipe wrench slipped in my greasy hands as I heard Hannah's voice drift down from the kitchen above. I was sprawled under our sink at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, fixing yet another leak in this house that seemed determined to fall apart around us. "Why do you always have to know where I am?" Her voice carried that sharp edge I'd been hearing more often lately. I froze, wrench halfway to the joint. Hannah was supposed to be grading case files for tomorrow's hearing. Who was she talking to at this hour? "I'm a grown woman, Evan. I don't need to check in every 5 minutes." Evan. That would be Evan Morrison, senior partner at Whitmore and Associates, where my wife had been climbing the ladder with impressive determination. I'd met him at the firm's Christmas party, one of those guys who shook hands like he was doing you a favor and talked about his BMW like it was a family member. The floorboards creaked as Hannah paced above me. I held my breath, suddenly more interested in this conversation than the persistent drip that had been driving me crazy for weeks. Fine. Yes, I'll see you tomorrow. And Evan, next time, maybe don't call when my husband might be listening." The line went quiet. I stared at the corroded pipe joint, my mind racing. In 15 years of marriage, Hannah had never felt the need to hide phone calls from me. We'd built our relationship on transparency, or so I'd thought. I finished the repair in mechanical silence, my hands working while my brain processed what I'd just heard. By the time I climbed out from under the sink, Hannah was already in bed, pretending to sleep. I stood in our kitchen, looking around at the life we'd built together. The photos on the refrigerator told the story of our marriage, our wedding day, vacations, our daughter Emma's graduation from high school last spring. When had things started to change? The next morning, Hannah was gone before I woke up. She'd left a note on the coffee maker. "Early meeting. Don't wait up tonight, working late on the Henderson case." I'd heard about the Henderson case, a messy divorce involving a construction company owner and his wife of 23 years. Hannah had been putting in long hours, coming home exhausted and distant. I'd been supportive, understanding, maybe too understanding. At my engineering firm, I tried to focus on the bridge renovation project that had been consuming my days. But every time I looked at the stress analysis reports, my mind wandered to Hannah's late nights and early mornings. Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. During lunch, I found myself driving past Whitmore and Associates. Hannah's Honda was in the parking lot right next to a silver BMW. Evan's car, no doubt. That evening, Hannah came home at nearly 10 o'clock. Her hair was slightly mussed, and she had that particular glow that I remembered from our early dating days. It had been months since I'd seen her look that energized. "How was the Henderson case?" I asked as she kicked off her heels. "Complicated. Lots of moving parts." She didn't meet my eyes. "I'm exhausted. Going to shower and head straight to bed." I watched her disappear upstairs, noting the way she clutched her phone like a lifeline. When the shower started running, I noticed she'd taken the phone with her. Over the next few days, I started paying attention to details I'd previously ignored. Hannah's sudden interest in new lingerie, the way she'd changed her perfume, how she'd started going to the gym again after years of making excuses. Most telling was her phone behavior. She'd always been casual about leaving it around, but now it never left her sight. She'd turned off notifications and started keeping it face down during dinner. Friday night, she announced she was going out with her friend Marcy for drinks and girl talk. "Which bar?" I asked casually. "Just that new wine place downtown. Nothing special." Again, no eye contact. After she left, I sat in my recliner, staring at the ceiling. The rational part of my brain insisted I was being paranoid. The suspicious part reminded me that my gut had never steered me wrong before. I made a decision that would have seemed unthinkable a week earlier. I got in my truck and drove downtown. The new wine bar was easy to spot. All glass and modern lighting, the kind of place that charged $20 for a sandwich. I parked across the street and waited. Hannah's car wasn't there. I drove to 3 other bars in town, checking parking lots like some kind of amateur detective. Nothing. On a whim, I headed toward the highway to the cluster of chain restaurants and hotels that serve travelers passing through our small town. At the Comfort Inn, I spotted Hannah's Honda parked next to that familiar silver BMW. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I pulled into a space with a clear view of the hotel entrance. Part of me wanted to storm inside and confront them. The smarter part knew I needed to think this through. I sat there for 2 hours, watching other guests come and go, my mind cycling through 15 years of memories. Had there been signs I'd missed? Or was this something new? At 11:15, the hotel door opened. Hannah emerged first, looking around nervously before walking quickly to her car. Evan followed a minute later, straightening his tie with the satisfied expression of a man who'd gotten exactly what he wanted. They didn't kiss goodbye or even acknowledge each other. This wasn't some impulsive mistake. It was practiced, calculated. I waited until both cars had left before driving home. Hannah beat me there by 10 minutes. When I walked in, she was already in her pajamas, curled up on the couch with a glass of wine. "How was girls' night?" I asked. "Oh, you know Marcy. Same complaints about her job, same drama with her mother." Hannah's performance was flawless. The right amount of tired exasperation, the casual dismissal of an unremarkable evening. If I hadn't seen her car at that hotel, I would have believed every word. "I'm going to bed," I announced. "Long day tomorrow." "I'll be up in a few minutes," she said, not looking away from the television. Lying in our bed, staring at the dark ceiling, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. The man who'd trusted blindly, who'd taken his wife's word without question, was disappearing. In his place was someone harder, more calculating, someone who was tired of being played for a fool. Saturday morning brought the kind of autumn weather that used to make Hannah and me plan hiking trips or drives to see the foliage. Now I watched her sleep and wondered how long she'd been lying to me. She woke up cheerful, almost giddy. "I was thinking we could drive up to Miller's farm today. Emma loved those apple cider donuts when she was little." The suggestion felt like another performance. Happy wife, suggesting family activities, maintaining the illusion of normalcy. "Sounds great," I said, matching her false enthusiasm. We spent the day playing house, walking through the orchard, sampling cider, posing for photos that would probably end up on Hannah's social media as evidence of our perfect marriage. She posted one on Instagram with the caption, "Fall adventures with my favorite guy." The comments rolled in from her friends and colleagues. Heart emojis and "you two are so cute" responses. I wondered if Evan saw it, if they laughed about it together. That night, after Hannah went to sleep, I did something I'd never imagined myself doing. I went through our credit card statements. The charges told a story I'd been too trusting to read, lingerie purchases at stores Hannah claimed to hate, lunch charges for two at expensive restaurants on days she'd told me she was eating at her desk, hotel charges that coincided with her late nights at the office. Going back 3 months, I found a pattern. Every Tuesday and Friday, like clockwork. Sometimes Thursdays. Always the same hotel, always the same restaurant beforehand. My wife wasn't just having an affair, she was having a scheduled, routine affair. The casualness of it was almost insulting. Monday morning, I called in sick to work. Instead, I drove to the boxing gym where I'd been training since college. Jerry, the old-timer who ran the place, took one look at me and pointed toward the heavy bag. "Whatever's eating you, take it out on the leather," he said. I spent 2 hours pounding the bag until my knuckles were raw and my shirt was soaked with sweat. Physical exhaustion helped clear my head, gave me space to think strategically instead of emotionally. Jerry handed me a towel and a bottle of water. Woman trouble? That obvious. 30 years running this place, I've seen that look plenty of times. The question is, what are you going to do about it? What was I going to do? Confronting Hannah directly would only give her a chance to lie more convincingly. Divorce lawyers would turn this into a lengthy, expensive battle. I needed leverage. "Ever hear of anyone hiring a private investigator around here?" I asked. Jerry laughed. "Son, this is a town of 12,000 people. You want to know something about someone, you ask Mrs. Dalton next door. She's been watching everyone's business for 40 years. Mrs. Dalton, our neighbor who seemed to spend her entire day positioned at her front window, monitoring the comings and goings of the neighborhood. I'd always found her nosiness annoying. Now it seemed potentially useful. That afternoon, I knocked on her door with a plate of cookies Hannah had made over the weekend. "Why, David, how thoughtful." Mrs. Dalton invited me in, clearly delighted by the unexpected visit. Her living room was positioned perfectly to observe our house and driveway. Family photos covered every surface, and the smell of lavender air freshener was almost overwhelming. "Hannah's been working such long hours lately," I said casually. "I barely see her anymore." "Oh yes, I've noticed. She's been leaving so early and coming home so late. Just last week I saw her leave at 6 in the morning, and she didn't get back until nearly midnight." Mrs. Dalton's memory for details was impressive. She could tell me exactly when Hannah had left and returned for the past month, often noting what she was wearing and whether she seemed rushed or happy. "Thursday night she came home with the biggest smile," Mrs. Dalton continued. "I thought maybe you two had worked things out after that argument." "Argument? Oh, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn. It was a few weeks ago, raised voices in your backyard. I couldn't help but overhear Hannah saying something about feeling trapped." This was news to me. I remembered the conversation now. Hannah complaining about feeling stuck in our small town, limited by my job and our mortgage. I'd thought we'd resolved it, but apparently she'd been sharing her frustrations with someone else. I left Mrs. Dalton's house with a timeline of Hannah's movements and a growing understanding of how carefully she'd been managing her double life. Tuesday evening, I told Hannah I was going to help Jerry with some repairs at the gym. Instead, I parked outside the Comfort Inn and waited. They arrived separately, as before. Hannah first, checking her phone nervously. Evan 10 minutes later, confident and casual like he owned the place. This time, I got out of my truck. The hotel lobby was generic and sterile, designed for travelers who needed a clean bed and nothing more. The teenage desk clerk looked up from his phone as I approached. "Can I help you?" "I think my wife might have left her earrings in one of your rooms. She was here earlier with her business partner." "I can't really give out information about guests," the kid said, but his tone suggested he might be persuaded. I pulled out my wallet and placed a $20 bill on the counter. "She's about 5'6", blonde hair, probably with a tall guy in an expensive suit." The kid glanced around, then leaned closer. "Room 237. They've been coming in every Tuesday and Friday for months. Always pay cash, always use fake names." Fake names. The premeditation was staggering. I thanked the clerk and walked back to my truck, my mind racing. Hannah wasn't just cheating. She was living an elaborate lie, complete with false identities and careful scheduling. Sitting in the parking lot, I realized that the woman I'd been married to for 15 years was essentially a stranger. The Hannah who made me coffee every morning and asked about my day was a performance, a role she played between her real life with Evan. The betrayal was complete, but it was the calculated nature of it that made my decision for me. If Hannah wanted to play games, I was about to become a much better player. Wednesday morning, Hannah was humming in the shower, actually humming like she was getting ready for something wonderful instead of another day of lying to her husband. I sat at the kitchen table, drinking coffee and watching her through new eyes. Everything about her morning routine now seemed like preparation for deception, the extra time she spent on her makeup, the way she chose her outfits, even the particular perfume she'd started wearing. "You seem happy," I observed when she came downstairs. "Just looking forward to the day, I guess." She kissed my cheek, a gesture that felt mechanical now. The Henderson case is really coming together. The Henderson case, her cover story for everything. "That's great. Maybe when it's finished we can take a long weekend somewhere, just the two of us." Something flickered across her face. Guilt, maybe, or panic. "That sounds nice. We'll see how things go." After she left, I called my boss and requested a few personal days. 15 years at the firm had earned me some flexibility, and I intended to use it. My first stop was the public library, where I spent 2 hours researching private investigation techniques and legal boundaries. I wasn't planning to break any laws, but I wanted to understand exactly what I could and couldn't do. The internet was full of advice for suspicious spouses, most of it either illegal or impractical. But buried in the forums and advice columns, I found useful information about documenting evidence and protecting myself legally. By noon, I had a plan. I drove to the electronics store in the next town over, where nobody would recognize me. A helpful college student sold me a small digital camera with excellent zoom capabilities and a voice recorder that could pick up conversations from across a room. "Doing some wildlife photography?" the kid asked as he rang up my purchases. "Something like that." That afternoon, I installed a GPS tracking app on my phone and created a fake social media account under the name Mike Thompson. It took some work to make it look legitimate. Fake photos, fake job history, fake friends. But by evening, I had a convincing online identity. Thursday morning, I followed Hannah to work from a distance, testing my surveillance skills. She drove straight to her office building, parked in her usual spot, and disappeared inside. Nothing suspicious, but I was learning her patterns. At lunch, she emerged with Evan. They walked to a restaurant 3 blocks away, chose a corner table, and spent an hour in intense conversation. Even from across the street, their body language was intimate, leaning close, touching hands, sharing food. I took photos with the zoom lens, capturing their faces clearly. The images were damning, but I needed more than lunch dates to build a complete case. Friday evening arrived with the predictable announcement, "Working late on depositions, don't wait up." This time, I was ready. I arrived at the Comfort Inn 30 minutes before Hannah, positioning myself in the parking lot of the adjacent restaurant with a clear view of the hotel entrance. The camera was loaded with fresh batteries, the voice recorder tested and ready. Hannah arrived at 7:15, nervous as always. She'd changed clothes since leaving work. Gone was the conservative business suit, replaced by a dress I'd never seen before, something purchased specifically for these encounters. Evan arrived 20 minutes later. Instead of going straight inside, they met in the parking lot for a brief conversation. I couldn't hear the words, but I captured several photos of them embracing before walking into the hotel together. The desk clerk, a different kid than Tuesday, barely looked up as they passed. This was routine for everyone involved. I waited in my truck, watching other guests come and go, thinking about the woman I'd married and the stranger she'd become. The Hannah I'd fallen in love with had been spontaneous, honest, incapable of sustained deception. This new version was calculating and careful, living a double life with apparent ease. At 10:30, they emerged separately. Hannah looked satisfied, almost glowing. Evan checked his phone and walked to his BMW with the casual confidence of a man who'd gotten away with something. I followed Hannah home, staying well back, and arrived 5 minutes after she did. She was already in her pajamas when I walked in, curled up on the couch with a book. "How were the depositions?" I asked. "Exhausting, but productive." She didn't look up from her book. "How was your evening?" "Quiet. Watched some television, did some reading of my own." The casual lies were becoming natural for both of us. Saturday brought an unexpected development. Emma called from college, announcing she was coming home for the weekend to do laundry and raid our refrigerator. "Dad, you sound weird," she said when I answered the phone. "Everything okay?" Emma had always been perceptive, able to read moods and tensions that others missed. Having her home while I was conducting surveillance would complicate things. "Just work stress," I told her. "Looking forward to seeing you." She arrived that afternoon with a carload of dirty clothes and her usual boundless energy. At 20, Emma was everything good about Hannah and me combined. Intelligent, ambitious, but still warm and genuine. "Mom seems different," she observed over dinner. "Happier, maybe, more energetic." Hannah beamed at the compliment. "I've been feeling more like myself lately, more confident." The irony was staggering. Hannah's affair was making her feel confident and energized, while it was slowly destroying me. She was thriving on the deception. After dinner, Emma cornered me in the garage while Hannah was showering. "Seriously, Dad, what's going on? You look like you haven't slept in weeks." I considered telling her everything. Emma deserved to know what kind of person her mother had become. But involving our daughter in this mess seemed cruel, and I wasn't ready to destroy Emma's relationship with Hannah until I had a complete understanding of the situation. "Just some work projects keeping me up at night," I said. "Nothing for you to worry about." Emma studied my face with the intensity she'd inherited from her mother. "You'd tell me if something was really wrong, right?" "Of course." Another lie, but a necessary one. Emma would learn the truth eventually, but not until I was ready to control how and when it happened. Sunday morning, Hannah announced she needed to go into the office for a few hours to prepare for Monday's hearings. Emma offered to come along and help organize files, but Hannah quickly declined. "It's really boring stuff. You should spend time with your father instead." After Hannah left, Emma and I drove to the lake where we'd spent countless summer afternoons when she was younger. The October air was crisp, and the trees surrounding the water were brilliant with fall colors. "This place always makes me think about being a kid," Emma said as we walked along the shore. "Remember when you taught me to skip stones here?" I remembered everything about Emma's childhood. The fishing trips, the camping adventures, the long conversations about her dreams and fears. I'd been present for all of it, engaged and committed to being the father she deserved. Had Hannah been equally committed to being the wife I deserved? Or had I been naive to expect loyalty and honesty? "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Are you and Mom happy? I mean, really happy?" The question caught me off guard. "What makes you ask that?" "I don't know. Something feels different when I'm home now, like you're both performing instead of just being yourselves." Emma's insight was uncomfortable and accurate. Hannah and I had been performing our marriage for months, maybe longer. I'd been playing the trusting husband while she played the devoted wife, both of us maintaining a facade that was becoming harder to sustain. "Marriage is complicated," I said finally. "People change, grow in different directions sometimes." "But you still love each other, right?" I looked out at the lake, watching a pair of ducks glide across the surface. Did I still love Hannah? Or was I in love with a memory of who she used to be? "I love the person I married," I said, "but I'm not sure that person exists anymore." Emma was quiet for a long moment. "That's really sad, Dad." Yes, it was. But sadness was rapidly being replaced by something harder and more focused. Hannah had made her choice to betray our marriage. Now I was going to make some choices of my own. Monday morning brought rain and the kind of gray October sky that matched my mood perfectly. Hannah left early for her big presentation, kissing my cheek with the same mechanical affection she'd been showing for weeks. Emma had returned to college the night before, but not without one final attempt to understand what was happening at home. "Promise me you'll talk to Mom if something's really wrong," she'd said while loading her car. "Don't just let things fall apart without trying to fix them." If only she knew how far beyond fixing we'd already gone. With Emma safely away and Hannah at work, I had the freedom to take my investigation to the next level. The photos from Friday night were clear and damning, but I needed more than evidence of hotel visits. I needed to understand the full scope of Hannah's deception. My first stop was the bank where we'd maintained our joint accounts for 15 years. Margaret, the branch manager, had handled our mortgage and car loans. She knew us as a stable, long-term couple. "I need to review our account activity for the past 6 months," I told her. "Hannah's been handling most of our finances lately, and I want to make sure I understand where we stand." Margaret pulled up our records, and we spent an hour going through every transaction. The pattern was even worse than I'd suspected. Hannah had been systematically moving money from our joint savings into a personal account I didn't know existed. Small amounts at first, 200 here, 300 there, but accelerating over the past 2 months. She opened this individual account in August, Margaret explained, showing me the paperwork. Said she wanted to start saving for a surprise anniversary gift. Our anniversary was in March, 6 months away, and the amounts she'd been depositing were far too large for any gift I could imagine. "How much has she moved total?" Margaret's fingers flew across her keyboard. "Approximately $12,000. $12,000. Nearly half our emergency fund moved without my knowledge or consent. Hannah wasn't just having an affair, she was preparing to leave. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't some midlife crisis or temporary lapse in judgment. Hannah was planning her exit strategy, probably with Evan's encouragement and support. I thanked Margaret and walked out of the bank in a daze. In the parking lot, I sat in my truck and tried to process what I'd learned. My wife was stealing from me while maintaining the pretense of a loving marriage. The betrayal was complete and calculating. My phone buzzed with a text from Hannah. "Presentation went great. Celebrating with the team tonight, home late." Team celebration. Another lie, delivered with casual ease. I drove to Whitmore and Associates and parked across the street from their building. Hannah's car was in the lot, along with Evan's BMW and several other vehicles I didn't recognize. Maybe there really was a team celebration, or maybe Hannah was just getting better at creating alibis. At 6 o'clock, I watched Hannah and Evan leave the building together. They walked to his BMW, got in, and drove toward downtown. I followed at a distance, curious to see where this celebration would take place. They went to Romano's, an upscale Italian restaurant that Hannah and I had been to twice in 15 years, both times for special occasions. Through the window, I could see them at a corner table, sharing wine and looking very much like a couple celebrating something significant. I parked where I could observe them without being seen and activated the zoom lens on my camera. For the next 2 hours, I documented their dinner, the intimate conversation, the hand-holding across the table, the kiss they shared over dessert. These weren't the actions of colleagues celebrating a work victory. This was a romantic dinner between two people who were comfortable with their relationship, secure in their deception. At 9:30, they left the restaurant together. Instead of returning to the hotel, Evan drove to an upscale apartment complex on the other side of town. Hannah followed in her own car, which she'd apparently retrieved from the office while I was focused on photographing their dinner. Evan's apartment was in a converted warehouse, the kind of trendy loft space that attracted young professionals with more money than sense. I watched from the parking lot as lights came on in a third-floor unit. They were getting careless, or maybe just more confident. The hotel meetings had been discreet, anonymous. This felt like a relationship that was moving towards something more permanent. I sat in the parking lot until nearly midnight, taking photos of the building and noting the apartment number. When Hannah finally emerged, she looked relaxed and satisfied in a way that made my stomach turn. She drove straight home, arriving 15 minutes before I did. By the time I walked in, she was already in bed, pretending to sleep. Tuesday morning, Hannah was back to her cheerful routine, humming in the shower and taking extra care with her appearance. "How was the celebration?" I asked over coffee. "Really nice. The whole team was thrilled about landing the Henderson account." She met my eyes without flinching. "We went to Romano's. I should have taken you there for our anniversary last year." The casual reference to our anniversary, while she was actively planning to leave me, was breathtaking in its audacity. "Maybe we can go this year," I said. "That would be lovely." After she left for work, I called the phone company and requested detailed records for our family plan. It took some persistence and a small fee, but within an hour I had 6 months of call and text logs for Hannah's phone. The data told the story I'd expected but hoped not to find. Starting in July, Hannah had been exchanging dozens of texts and calls with Evan's number every day. The frequency had increased dramatically in September, around the time she'd opened her secret bank account. I spent the afternoon creating a timeline, cross-referencing the phone records with our bank statements and credit card charges. The picture that emerged was of a woman who had been planning her departure for months while maintaining the facade of a committed marriage. Every girls' night had been a date with Evan. Every late night at the office had been a hotel visit. Every team celebration had been a romantic dinner. The scope of the deception was staggering. Hannah had been living a completely fabricated life, lying about her whereabouts and activities every single day. But the most damaging discovery came when I cross-referenced her phone records with Emma's college schedule. Hannah had been meeting Evan during several of Emma's important events, her orientation, her first semester midterms, even her birthday weekend. While I'd been calling Emma to check on her progress and send care packages, Hannah had been in hotel rooms with her lover. The betrayal of our daughter's trust felt worse than the betrayal of our marriage vows. That evening, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible a week earlier. I was going to fight back, but not through lawyers or counselors or tearful confrontations. Hannah had chosen to wage this war through deception and manipulation. I was going to respond in kind, but with one crucial difference. I was going to be better at it than she was. The trusting husband was gone forever. In his place was someone harder, smarter, and far more dangerous than Hannah could imagine. She wanted to play games? Fine. But she was about to discover that she'd been playing in the minor leagues. Wednesday brought unseasonably warm weather, and Hannah's announcement that she'd be working late again. The routine was so established now that she barely bothered to elaborate on her lies. "Depositions," she said, not looking up from her phone. "Could be a very late night." I nodded and continued reading the newspaper, playing the role of the oblivious husband one more time. But inside, I was calculating. Tonight would be perfect for what I had planned. After Hannah left, I drove to 3 different electronics stores in neighboring towns, paying cash for equipment that would have seemed paranoid a month ago. Micro cameras, audio recording devices, GPS trackers, the tools of surveillance that had become as familiar to me as my engineering instruments. The plan I'd developed was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of just documenting Hannah's affair, I was going to create a situation where she'd expose herself publicly and completely. My first stop was Hannah's office building. The parking garage was poorly lit and rarely patrolled, making it perfect for my purposes. I attached a small GPS tracker to the underside of her Honda, positioning it where it would be invisible but easily accessible if I needed to retrieve it. Next, I visited Evan's apartment building. The security was minimal, just a key card reader that most residents propped open for convenience. I slipped inside and located his mailbox, noting his full address and apartment number. The building directory revealed something interesting: Evan Morrison, 3B, and directly below him, Marcy Chen, 2B. Hannah's supposed best friend lived in the same building as her lover. That couldn't be a coincidence. I'd met Marcy dozens of times over the years, at dinner parties, holiday gatherings, girls' nights that I now realized had been cover stories for Hannah's activities. She was Hannah's closest confidant, the friend who'd supposedly been providing alibis and emotional support. Now I understood that Marcy had been facilitating the affair from the beginning. The scope of the conspiracy was expanding, and with it, my anger. This wasn't just Hannah betraying our marriage, it was a coordinated effort involving multiple people who'd been laughing at my ignorance for months. That afternoon, I drove to the gym and spent 2 hours working out my frustration on the heavy bag. Jerry watched me demolish my previous endurance records with knowing eyes. "You're getting stronger," he observed. "Anger can be useful if you channel it right." "What if you found out your whole life was a lie?" I asked between combinations. "Then I'd stop living the lie and start living the truth." Jerry handed me a towel. "Question is, what's your truth?" My truth was that I'd been played for a fool by people who thought I was too weak or stupid to fight back. My truth was that I deserved better than a wife who stole from me while planning her escape. My truth was that Hannah and her conspirators were about to learn exactly who they'd been underestimating. That evening, I put my plan into motion. Using my fake social media account, I sent friend requests to several of Hannah's colleagues, including 2 junior associates who'd been at the firm's Christmas party. Young lawyers were notorious gossips, and I was counting on their curiosity about their boss's personal life. Next, I created an anonymous email account and sent a carefully worded message to the managing partner at Whitmore & Associates. "You might want to review your firm's policy regarding relationships between partners and associates. Some of your employees are conducting personal business on company time, possibly creating liability issues." I didn't mention names or specific accusations, just enough to plant seeds of suspicion that would grow into a formal investigation. The final element of my trap required patience. I drove to the Comfort Inn and positioned myself in the parking lot, camera ready, waiting for Hannah and Evan to arrive for their regular Tuesday night encounter. They appeared right on schedule, following their established routine. Hannah first, nervous and checking her phone. Evan 10 minutes later, confident and casual. But tonight, I wasn't content to simply document their arrival. Tonight, I was going to create a permanent record of their relationship that couldn't be denied or explained away. I waited until they'd been inside for 30 minutes, then approached the hotel desk. The same teenage clerk who'd been helpful before was on duty, and he recognized me immediately. "Back again?" he asked with a knowing smile. "I need to get into that room," I said, placing $50 on the counter. "Just for 5 minutes." The kid looked around nervously. "I can't do that, man. I could lose my job." "They're in there destroying evidence of financial fraud," I lied smoothly. "If I don't get proof tonight, they're going to disappear with a lot of people's money." It was a calculated gamble, appealing to the kid's sense of justice while offering enough money to overcome his reluctance. After another moment of hesitation, he palmed the cash and handed me a key card. 5 minutes, he said, and I never saw you. Room 237 was at the end of a long hallway, isolated from the other occupied rooms. I could hear voices inside, Hannah's laugh, Evan's deeper tones, the sounds of people who thought they were completely safe and unobserved. I positioned my microcamera in the hallway, angled to capture anyone entering or leaving the room. Then I activated the audio recorder and placed it against the door. The conversation inside was clearly audible. "Can't keep doing this much longer," Hannah was saying. "David's starting to ask questions." "He's not smart enough to figure anything out," Evan replied. "Besides, once you file for divorce, it won't matter what he knows." I feel bad about Emma. She adores him. She'll get over it. Kids adapt. And once we're married, she'll have a stepfather who can actually provide for her future. The casual dismissal of my relationship with my daughter was the final straw. These people weren't just destroying my marriage. They were planning to manipulate Emma's feelings and loyalties for their own benefit. I retrieved my equipment and returned the keycard to the desk clerk, my hands shaking with barely controlled rage. "Get what you needed?" he asked. More than I expected. Back in my truck, I sat in the parking lot and listened to the full recording. Hannah and Evan had discussed their timeline for her divorce filing, their plans for a quick marriage afterward, and their strategy for maximizing Hannah's share of our assets. They'd also talked about Marcy's role in providing alibis and emotional support, confirming my suspicion that the conspiracy extended beyond just the two of them. Most damaging was their discussion of Emma's college expenses. Hannah had been telling Evan that I was unable to afford Emma's tuition, positioning herself as the responsible parent while painting me as financially inadequate. The truth was that I'd been covering Emma's expenses from my own savings, while Hannah had been stealing from our joint accounts to fund her new relationship. By the time Hannah came home that night, I had copies of the audio recording stored in 3 separate locations, along with photographs and documentation of her financial theft. She found me in the kitchen, apparently reading a book and drinking tea. "How were the depositions?" I asked without looking up. "Long and complicated. I'm exhausted." She kissed the top of my head, a gesture that now felt like mockery. "Get some rest," I said. "Tomorrow's going to be a big day." Hannah paused at the kitchen doorway. "What's happening tomorrow?" I looked up and smiled, letting her see something different in my eyes, something harder and more calculating than she'd ever seen before. "Oh, I think you'll find out soon enough." For the first time in months, Hannah looked uncertain, almost afraid. She'd been so focused on her own deceptions that she'd forgotten to watch for mine. Her mistake, and tomorrow she was going to start paying for it. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that made everything seem sharper, more focused. Hannah was unusually quiet over coffee, stealing glances at me like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "You seem different," she said finally. "Do I? Maybe I'm just feeling more like myself lately." I used her exact words from the previous week and watched her face register the subtle mockery. After she left for work, I made 3 phone calls that would change everything. The first was to Margaret at the bank. "I need to freeze our joint accounts immediately. I have reason to believe they've been compromised." The second was to Emma at college. "Honey, I need you to come home this weekend. There are some things about your mother and me that you need to know." The third was to my lawyer, Tom Bradley, who'd handled our house purchase and wills. "Tom, I need to see you today. I'm filing for divorce, and I have evidence of financial misconduct." By noon, I had set in motion a series of events that would systematically dismantle the life Hannah thought she was controlling. The frozen bank accounts would prevent her from moving any more money. Emma's weekend visit would ensure she heard the truth from me before Hannah could spin her own version, and Tom's legal expertise would protect my interests while exposing Hannah's theft. But I wasn't finished. Hannah had spent months humiliating me with her lies and deceptions. Now it was her turn to experience public exposure and consequences. I drove to Whitmore and Associates and parked across the street, camera ready. At exactly 12:30, Hannah and Evan emerged from the building together, walking toward his BMW for another of their lunch dates. This time, I didn't just photograph them from a distance. I got out of my truck, crossed the street, and approached them directly. "Hannah," I called out. "What a pleasant surprise." She spun around, her face going pale when she saw me. Evan stepped slightly behind her, suddenly looking less confident. "David, what are you doing here?" "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd surprise my wife for lunch." I smiled at both of them. "You remember Evan Morrison, don't you? Hannah's mentioned working so closely with him lately." Evan extended his hand for a handshake, trying to maintain professional composure. "Good to see you again, David." I ignored his hand and pulled out my phone instead. "Actually, Evan, I was hoping you could help me understand something." I showed them both a photograph from Tuesday night, crystal clear images of them entering the Comfort Inn together. Hannah's face went white. Evan took a step back, looking around nervously to see if anyone else was witnessing this confrontation. "David, I can explain," Hannah started. "Oh, I'm sure you can. You've gotten very good at explanations lately." I pocketed my phone and looked directly at Evan. "Tell me, does your firm have a policy about partners conducting personal relationships with married associates?" "This isn't the place for this conversation," Evan said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "You're right. The place for this conversation was probably 6 months ago, before you started scheduling regular hotel visits with my wife." I turned back to Hannah. "Or maybe the place was last week, before you stole $12,000 from our joint accounts." Several people walking past had stopped to listen. Hannah grabbed my arm, trying to pull me away from the growing audience. "Please, David, not here, not like this." "Where then, Hannah? In another hotel room? In Evan's apartment? Or maybe we should include Marcy in the conversation, since she's been helping you lie to me for months." The mention of Marcy's involvement hit both of them like a physical blow. They exchanged a look that confirmed everything I'd suspected about the conspiracy. "I don't know what you think you know," Evan said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I know that you've been meeting my wife twice a week for 6 months. I know that she's been stealing money to prepare for leaving me. I know that you've been using your position at this firm to manipulate a vulnerable married woman." I paused, letting the accusations sink in. "And I know that your managing partner is going to be very interested in reviewing your conduct." Evan's face went from pale to gray. Law firms took ethical violations seriously, especially when they involved partners exploiting their authority over associates. "David, please," Hannah whispered. "Think about Emma. Think about our family." "I am thinking about Emma. I'm thinking about how you've been lying to her while you planned to destroy her family. I'm thinking about how you told Evan that I couldn't afford her college expenses while you were stealing money that was meant for her education." Hannah's eyes widened. She hadn't realized I'd overheard their private conversations. The small crowd of observers was growing larger. Several people had their phones out, recording the confrontation for social media. By evening, this scene would be circulating through our small town like wildfire. "This is harassment," Evan said, trying to regain some control. "I'm calling the police." Please do. I'm sure they'd be interested in the evidence I've collected. Hotel records, financial documents, recorded conversations." I smiled at his shocked expression. Did you really think I was too stupid to figure out what you were doing?" I turned and walked back to my truck, leaving Hannah and Evan standing on the sidewalk in front of her office building, exposed and humiliated before their colleagues and half the downtown business district. The confrontation had lasted less than 10 minutes, but it had accomplished everything I'd hoped. Their secret relationship was now public knowledge. Evan's career was in jeopardy, and Hannah's carefully constructed double life was collapsing in real time. That afternoon, I met with Tom Bradley and presented my evidence. The photographs, audio recordings, and financial documents painted a clear picture of adultery and theft. "This is comprehensive," Tom said, reviewing the materials. "She won't be able to deny any of it. I don't want to just win the divorce. I want her to understand that there are consequences for treating people like they're disposable." Tom looked at me with something approaching admiration. "David, I've known you for 10 years, and I've never seen you like this. Hannah created this version of me. She should be careful what she wishes for." By 5 o'clock, I was home, waiting for Hannah's inevitable return. She arrived 20 minutes later, her face streaked with tears and her professional composure completely shattered. "How could you do that to me?" she demanded the moment she walked in. In front of everyone I work with? How could I do that to you? I stood up from my chair, and she took an involuntary step backward. Hannah, you've been lying to me for 6 months. You've been stealing our money, planning to leave me, and turning our daughter against me, and you're asking how I could embarrass you. I never meant for it to happen this way. What way did you mean for it to happen? Were you planning to tell me the truth eventually, or was I supposed to figure it out when you served me with divorce papers? She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. This was the woman I'd loved for 15 years, the mother of my daughter, reduced to tears by the consequences of her own choices. But then I remembered the casual way she and Evan had discussed my inadequacies, their plans for my daughter, their confidence that I was too weak to fight back. The bank accounts are frozen, I said quietly. I've filed for divorce. Emma's coming home this weekend to hear the truth about what you've done, and Evan's managing partner has received detailed documentation of your relationship. Hannah looked up at me with something approaching terror. You can't destroy my entire life over this. I'm not destroying your life, Hannah. I'm just refusing to let you destroy mine anymore. She tried to speak, but I held up my hand to stop her. You made your choice 6 months ago when you decided I wasn't worth your honesty or loyalty. Now you get to live with the consequences of that choice. I walked toward the stairs, then paused and looked back at her. Oh, and Hannah? You might want to find somewhere else to stay tonight. This is my house now, and you're no longer welcome in it. As I climbed the stairs, I could hear her crying behind me. But for the first time in months, I felt something approaching peace. The war was over, and despite everything Hannah had put me through, I had won it decisively. Tomorrow, I would begin rebuilding my life. Tonight, I would sleep soundly for the first time since this nightmare began. The trusting husband was gone forever. In his place was someone stronger, smarter, and completely unwilling to be anyone's victim ever again. Hannah had taught me to be ruthless. It was a lesson I would never forget.